Fei-Fei, thank you so much for being here and welcome to the podcast.
I'm excited to be here, Lenny.
I'm even more excited to have you here. It is such a treat to get to chat with you. There's so much that I want to talk about. You've been at the center of this AI explosion that we're seeing right now for so long. We're going to talk about a bunch of the history that I think a lot of people don't even know about how this whole thing started. But let me first read a quote from Wired about you, just so people get a sense. And in the intro, I'll share all of the other epic things you've done, but I think this is a good way to just set context. Fei-Fei is one of a tiny group of scientists, a group perhaps small enough to fit around a kitchen table, who are responsible for AI's recent remarkable advances. A lot of people call you the godmother of AI. And unlike a lot of AI leaders, you're an AI optimist. You don't think AI is going to replace us. You don't think it's going to take all our jobs. You don't think it's going to kill us. So I thought it'd be fun to start there. Just what's your perspective on how AI is going to impact humanity over time?
Yeah, okay. So, Lenny, let me be very clear. I'm not a utopian. So it's not like I think AI will have no impact on jobs or people. In fact, I'm a humanist. I believe that whatever AI does in currently or in the future is up to us. It's up to the people. So I do believe technology is a net positive for humanity. If you look at the long course of civilization, I think fundamentally we're an innovative species that if you look at from, written record thousands of years ago to now, humans just kept innovating ourselves and innovating our tools. And with that, we make lives better, we make work better, we build civilization. And I do believe AI is part of that. So that's where the optimism comes from. But I think every technology is a double-edged sword. And if we're not doing the right thing as a species, as a society, as communities, as individuals, we can screw this up as well.
There's this line, I think this was when you were presenting to Congress. There's nothing artificial about AI. It's inspired by people, it's created by people, and most importantly, it impacts people. I don't have a question there, but what a great line.
Yeah, I feel pretty deeply. I started working AI 2.5 decades ago, and I've been having students for the past 2 decades. And almost every student who graduates, I remind them, when they graduate from my lab, that your field is called artificial intelligence, but there's nothing artificial about it.
Coming back to the point you just made about how it's kind of up to us about where this all goes, what is it you think we need to get right? How do we set things on a path? I know this is a very difficult question to answer, but just what's your advice? What do you think we should be keeping in mind?
How many hours do we have?
How do we align AI? There we go. Let's solve it.
So I think people should be responsible individuals, no matter what we do. This is what we teach our children, and this is what we need to do as grown-ups as well, no matter which part of the AI development or AI deployment or AI application you are participating in. And most likely many of us, especially as technologists, we're in multiple points. We should act like responsible individuals and care about this, actually care a lot about this. I think everybody today should care about AI because it is going to impact your individual life. It is going to impact your community. It's going to impact the society and the future generation. And caring about it as a responsible person is the first, but also the most important step.
Okay, so let me actually take a step back and kind of go to the beginning of AI. Most people started hearing and caring about AI is what it's called today. Just like, I don't know, a few years ago when ChatGPT came out, maybe it was like 3 years ago.
3 years ago, almost one more month, 3 years ago.
Wow. Okay, and that was ChatGPT coming out? Is that the milestone that you have in mind? Okay, cool. That's exactly how I saw it. But very few people know there was a long, long history of people working on, it was called machine learning back then, and there's other terms, and now it's just everything's AI. And there was kind of like a long period of just a lot of people working on it. And then there's this, what people refer to as the AI winter, where people just gave up almost. Most people did and just, okay, this idea isn't going anywhere. And then the work you did actually was essentially the spark that brought us out of AI winter and is directly responsible for the world we're in now of just AI is all we talk about. As you just said, it's going to impact everything we do. So I thought it'd be really interesting to hear from you, just kind of like the brief history of what the world was like before ImageNet, then just the work you did to create ImageNet, why that was so important, and then just what happened after.
It is for me hard to keep in mind that AI is so new for everybody when I lived my entire professional life in AI. There's a part of me that is just, it's so satisfying to see a personal curiosity that I started barely out of teenagehood and now has become a transformative force of our civilization. It generally is a civilizational level technology. So that journey is about 30 years or 20 something, 20 plus years, and it's just very satisfying. So where did it all start? Well, I'm not even the first generation AI researcher. The first generation really date back to the 50s and 60s, and Alan Turing was ahead of his time in the 40s by asking daring humanity with the question, is there thinking machines, right? And of course, he has a specific way of testing this concept of thinking machine, which is a conversational chatbot, which to his standard, we now have a thinking machine. But that was just a more anecdotal inspiration. The field really began in the 50s when computer scientists came together and look at how we can use computer programs and algorithms to build these programs that can do things that have been only capable by human cognition. So and that was the beginning, and the founding fathers, the Dartmouth workshop in the 1956. We have Professor John McCarthy, who later came to Stanford, who coined the term artificial intelligence. And between the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, it was the early days of AI exploration. And we had logic systems, we had expert systems. We also had early exploration of neural network. And then it came to around the late 80s, the 90s, and the very beginning of the 21st century. That stretch, about 20 years, is actually the beginning of machine learning. It's the marriage between computer programming and statistical learning. And that marriage brought a very, very critical concept into AI, which is that purely rule-based program is not going to account for the vast amount of cognitive capabilities that we imagine computers can do. So we have to use machines to learn the patterns. Once the machines can learn the patterns, it has a hope to do more things. For example, if you give it 3 cats, the hope is not just for the machines to recognize these 3 cats. The hope is the machines can recognize the 4th cat, the 5th cat, the 6th cat, and all the other cats. And that's a learning ability that is fundamental to humans and many animals. And we as a field realize we need machine learning. So that was up till the beginning of the 21st century. I entered the field of AI literally in the year of 2000. That's when my PhD began at Caltech. And so I was one of the first generation machine learning researchers. And we were already studying this concept of machine learning, especially neural network. I remember that was one of my first courses at Caltech, is called neural network. But it was very painful. It was still smack in the middle of the so-called AI winter, meaning the public didn't look at this too much. There wasn't that much funding, but there was also a lot of ideas flowing around. And I think 2 things happened to myself that brought my own career so close to the birth of modern AI, is that I chose to look at artificial intelligence through the lens of visual intelligence, because humans are deeply visual animals. We can talk a little more later, but so much of our intelligence is built upon visual, perceptual, spatial understanding, not just language per se. I think they're complementary. So I choose to look at visual intelligence. And my PhD and my early professor years, my students and I are very committed to a North Star problem, which is solving the problem of object recognition, because it's a building block for the perceptual world, right? We go around the world interpreting, reasoning, and interacting with it more or less at the object level. We don't interact with the world at the molecular level. We don't interact with the world as we sometimes do, but we rarely. For example, if you want to lift a teapot, you don't say, okay, the teapot is made of 100 pieces of porcelain and let me work on these 100 pieces. You look at it as one object and interact with it. So object is really important. So I was among the first researchers to identify this as a North Star problem. But I think what happened is that as a student of AI and then a researcher of AI, I was working on all kinds of mathematical models, including neural network, including Bayesian network, including many, many models. And there was one singular pain point, is that these models don't have data to be trained on. And as a field, we were so focusing on these models, but it dawned on me that human learning, as well as evolution, is actually a big data learning process. Humans learn with so much experience, constantly. And evolution, if you look at time, animals evolve with just experiencing the world. So I think my student and I conjectured that a very critically overlooked ingredient of bringing AI to life is big data. And then we began this ImageNet project in 2006, 2007. We were very ambitious. We want to get the entire internet's image data on objects. Now, granted, internet was a lot smaller than today. So I felt like that ambition was at least not too crazy. Now it's totally delusional to think a couple of graduate student and a professor can do this. But and that's what we did. We curated very carefully 15 million images on the internet, created a taxonomy of 22,000 concepts, borrowing other researchers' work, like linguists' work on WordNet, and it's a particular way of dictionarying words. And we combined that into ImageNet, and we open sourced that to the research community. We held an annual ImageNet challenge to encourage everybody to participate in this. We continue to do our own research, but 2012 was the moment that many people think was the beginning of the deep learning or birth of modern AI, because a group of Toronto researchers led by Professor Jeff Hinton participated in ImageNet challenge, used the ImageNet big data and 2 GPUs from NVIDIA, and created successfully the first neural network algorithm that it didn't totally solve, but made a huge progress towards solving the problem of object recognition. And that combination of the trio technology, big data, neural network, and GPU, was kind of the golden recipe for modern AI. And then fast forward the public moment of AI, which is the ChatGPT moment. If you look at the ingredients of what brought ChatGPT to the world, technically it still used these 3 ingredients. Now it's internet scale data, mostly texts, is a much more complex neural network architecture than 2012, but it's still neural network, and a lot more GPUs, but it's still GPUs. So these 3 ingredients are still at the core of modern AI.
Incredible. I've never heard that full story before. I love that it was 2 GPUs was the first. I love that.
Yeah.
And now it's, I don't know, hundreds of thousands, right? That are
Oh, yeah.
orders of magnitudes more powerful.
Yep.
And those two GPUs where they just bought, they were like gaming GPUs. They just went to the game
Yes.
store, right? That people
Yeah.
use for playing games. As you said, this continues to be in a large way the way models get smarter. Some of the fastest growing companies in the world right now, I've had them all mostly on the podcast, Mercor and Surge and Scale. Like they do this, they continue to do this for labs.
Yeah.
Just give them more and more labeled data of the things they're most
Oh
excited and
yeah, I
interested in.
remember Alex Wang from
Mm.
Scale, very early days. I probably still has his emails when he was starting Scale. He was very kind. He keeps sending me emails about how ImageNet inspired Scale. I was very pleased to see that.
One of my other favorite takeaways from what you just shared is just such an example of high agency and just doing things. That's kind of a meme on Twitter. Just you can just do things. You're just like, okay, this is probably necessary to move AI. And it's called machine learning back then, right? Was that the term most people used?
I think it was interchangeably. It's true. Like I do remember the companies, the tech companies. I'm not going to name names, but I was in a conversation in one of the early days. I think it is in the middle of 2015, middle of 2016. Some tech companies avoid using the word AI because they were not sure if AI was a dirty word. And I remember I was actually encouraging everybody to use the word AI because to me, that is one of the most audacious questions humanity has ever asked in our quest for science and technology. And I feel very proud of this term. But yes, at the beginning, some people were not sure.
What year was that roughly when AI was a dirty word?
2016. I think that
2016.
was
Less than 10 years
that
ago.
was the changing. Like some people start calling it AI. But I think if you look at the Silicon Valley tech companies, if you trace their marketing term, I think 2017-ish was the beginning of companies calling themselves AI companies.
That's incredible. Just how the world has changed.
Yes.
Now you can't not call yourself an AI company.
I know.
Just 9-ish years later.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Okay. Is there anything else around the history, that early history that you think people don't know that you think is important before we chat about where you think things are going in the work that you're doing?
I think as all histories, I'm keenly aware that I am recognized for being part of the history, but there are so many heroes and so many researchers. We're talking about generations of researchers. There, in my own world, there are so many people who have inspired me, which I talked about in my book. But I do feel our culture, especially Silicon Valley, tends to assign achievements to a single person. Well, while I think it has value, but it's just to be remembered. AI is a field of, at this point, 70 years old, and we have gone through many generations. No one could have gotten here by themselves.
Okay. So let me ask you this question. It feels like we're always on this precipice of AGI, this kind of vague term people throw around. AGI is coming. It's going to take over everything. What's your take on how far you think we might be from AGI? Do you think we're going to get there on the current trajectory we're on? Do you think we need more breakthroughs? Do you think the current approach will get us there?
Yeah, this is a very interesting term, Lenny. I don't know if anyone has ever defined AGI. There are many different definitions, including, some kind of superpower for machines, all the way to machines can become economically viable agent in the society. In other words, making salaries to live. Is that the definition of AGI? As a scientist, I take science very seriously. And I entered the field because I was inspired by this audacious question of, can machines think and do things in the way that humans can do? For me, that's always the North Star of AI. And from that point of view, I don't know what's the difference between AI and AGI. I think we've done very well in achieving parts of the goal, including conversational AI. But I don't think we have completely conquered all the goals of AI. And I think our founding fathers, the Alan Turing, I wonder if Alan Turing is around today and you ask him to contrast AI versus AGI, he might just shrug and said, well, I asked the same question back in 1940s. So I don't want to get onto a rabbit hole of defining AI versus AGI. I feel AGI is more a marketing term than a scientific term. As a scientist and technologist, AI is my North Star, is my field's North Star, and I'm happy people call it whatever name they want to call it.
So let me ask you maybe this way. Like you described, there's kind of these components that from ImageNet and AlexNet kind of took us to where we're today. GPUs, essentially, data, label data, just like the algorithm of the model. There's also just the transformer, feels like an important step in that trajectory. Do you feel like those are the same components that'll get us to, I don't know, 10 times smarter model, something that's like life-changing for the entire world? Or do you think we need more breakthroughs? I know we're going to talk about world models, which I think is a component of this, but is there anything else that you think is like, oh, this will plateau, or okay, this will take us, just need more data, more compute, more GPUs?
Oh no, I definitely think we need more innovations. I think scaling laws of more data, more GPUs, and bigger current model architecture there's still a lot to be done there. But I absolutely think we need to innovate more. There's not a single deeply scientific discipline in human history that has arrived at a place that says we're done innovating. And AI is one of the, if not the youngest discipline in human civilization in terms of science and technology. We're still scratching the surface. For example, like I said, we're going to segue into world models. Today, you take a model and run it through a video of a couple of office rooms and ask the model to count the number of chairs. And this is something a toddler could do, or maybe a elementary school kid could do. And AI could not do that, right? So there's just so much AI today could not do. Then let alone thinking about how did, someone like Isaac Newton look at the movements of the celestial bodies and derive an equation or a set of equations that governs the movement of all bodies. That level of creativity, extrapolation, abstraction, we have no way of enabling AI to do that today. And then let's look at emotional intelligence. If you look at a student come into a teacher's office and have a conversation about motivation, passion, what to learn, what's the problem that's really bothering you, that conversation, as powerful as today's conversational bots are, you don't get that level of emotional cognitive intelligence from today's AI. So there's a lot we can do better. And I do not believe we're done innovating.
Demis had this really interesting interview recently from DeepMind/Google, where someone asked him just like, what do you think, how far are we from AGI? What does it look like when through there? He had a really interesting way of approaching it is if we were to give the most cutting edge model all the information until the end of the 20th century, see if it could come up with all the breakthroughs Einstein had. And so far, we're nowhere near that. But they can
we're not. In fact, it's even worse. Let's give AI all the data, including modern instruments data of celestial bodies, which Newton did not have, and give it to that. And just ask AI to create the 17th century set of equations on the laws of bodily movements. Today's AI cannot do that.
All right, we're ways away, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about world models. This is, to me, this is just another really amazing example of you being ahead of where people end up. So you were way ahead on, okay, we just need a lot of clean data for AI and neural networks to learn. You've been talking about this idea of world models for a long time. You started a company to build, essentially, there's language models. This is a different thing. This is a world model. We'll talk about what that is. And now, as I was preparing for this, Elon's like talking about world models, Jensen's talking about world models. I know Google's working on this stuff. You've been at this for a long time, and you actually just launched something we're gonna talk about right before this podcast airs. Talk about what is a world model? Why is it so important?
I'm very excited to see that more and more people are talking about world models like Elon, like Jensen. Um, I have been thinking about really how to push AI forward all my life, right? And the large language models that came out of the research world and then OpenAI and all this for the past few years were extremely inspiring, even for a researcher like me. I remembered when GPT-2 came out, and that was in, I think, late 2020. I was co-director. I still am, but I was at that time full-time co-director of Stanford's Human Centered AI Institute. And I remember it was, the public was not aware of the power of the large language model yet. But as researchers, we were seeing it. We're seeing the future. And I had pretty long conversations with my natural language processing colleagues like Percy Liang and Chris Manning. We were talking about how critical this technology is going to be. And Stanford AI Institute, Human Centered AI Institute, HAI, was the first one to establish a full research center on foundation model. We were, Percy Liang and many researchers led the first academic paper on foundation models. So it was just very inspiring for me. So of course, I come from the world of visual intelligence. And I was just thinking there's so much we can push forward on beyond language, because humans have used our sense of spatial intelligence and world understanding to do so many things, and they are beyond language. Think about a very chaotic first responder scene, whether it's fire or some traffic accident or some natural disaster. And it's, if you immerse yourself in those scenes and think about how people organize themselves to rescue people, to stop further disasters, to put down fires, to a lot of that is movements, is spontaneous understanding of objects, worlds, human situational awareness. Language is part of that, but a lot of those situations, language cannot get you to put down the fire. So that is, what is that? I was thinking a lot. And in the meantime, I was doing a lot of robotics research. And it dawned on me that the linchpin of connecting the additional intelligence, in addition to language, and connecting embodied AI, which are robotics, connecting visual intelligence is the sense of spatial intelligence about understanding the world. And that's when I think it was 2024, I gave a TED talk about spatial intelligence and world models. And I start formulating this idea back in 2022 based on my robotics and computer vision research. And then one thing that was really clear to me is that I really want to work with the brightest technologists and move as fast as possible to bring this technology to life. And that's when we founded this company called World Labs. And you can see the word world is in the title of our company because we believe so much in world modeling and spatial intelligence.
People are so used to just chatbots, and that's a large language model. The simple way to understand a world model is you basically describe a scene, and it generates an infinitely explorable world. We'll link to the thing you launched, which we'll talk about, but just, is that a simple way to understand it?
That's part of it, Lenny. I think a simple way to understand a world model is that this model can allow anyone to create any worlds in their mind's eye by prompting, whether it's an image or a sentence, and also be able to interact in this world, whether you're browsing and walking or picking objects up or changing things, as well as to reason within this world. For example, if the person consuming, if the agent consuming this output of the world model is a robot, it should be able to plan its path and help to, tidy the kitchen, for example. So world model is a foundation that you can use to reason, to interact, and to create worlds.
Great. Yeah. So robots feels like that's potentially the next big focus for AI researchers and just like the impact on the world. And what you're saying here is this is a key missing piece of making robots actually work in the real world, understanding how the world works.
Yeah, well, first of all, I do think there's more than robots. That's exciting. But I agree with everything you just said. I think world modeling and spatial intelligence is a key missing piece of embodied AI. I also think let's not underestimate that humans are embodied agents and humans can be augmented by AI's intelligence. Just like today, humans are language animals, but we're very much augmented by AI when helping us to, do language tasks, including software engineering. I think that we shouldn't underestimate, or maybe we tend not to talk about how humans as an embodied agents can actually benefit so much from world models and spatial intelligent models, as well as robots can.
So the big unlocks here, robots, which a huge deal. If this works out, imagine each of us has robots doing a bunch of stuff for us, goes into, they help us with disasters, things like that. Games, obviously, is a really cool example, just like infinitely playable games that you just invent out of your head. And then creativity feels like just like being fun, having fun, being creative, thinking of wild new worlds and environments.
And also design. Humans design from machines to buildings to homes, and also scientific discovery, right? There is so much. I like to use the example of the discovery of the structure of DNA. If you look at one of the most important piece in DNA's discovery history is the X-ray diffraction photo that was captured by Rosalind Franklin. And it was a flat 2D photo of a structure that looks like a cross with diffractions. You can Google those photos. But with that 2D flat photo, humans, especially two important humans, James Watson and Francis Crick, in addition to their other information, was able to reason in 3D space and deduce a highly three-dimensional double helix structure of the DNA. And that structure cannot possibly be 2D. You cannot think in 2D and deduce that structure. You have to think in 3D spatial, use the human spatial intelligence. So I think even in scientific discovery, spatial intelligence or AI-assisted spatial intelligence is critical.
This is such an example of, I think it was Chris Dixon that had this line that the next big thing is going to start off feeling like a toy. When ChatGPT just came out, I remember Sal Altman just tweeted, it's like, here's a cool thing we're playing with, check it out. Now it's the fastest growing product in all of history, changed the world.
Yeah.
And it's oftentimes the things that just look like, okay, this is cool, that it's fun to play with and end up changing the world most.
Yeah.
This episode is brought to you by Cinch, the customer communications cloud. Here's the thing about digital customer communications. Whether you're sending marketing campaigns, verification codes, or account alerts, you need them to reach users reliably. That's where Cinch comes in. Over 150,000 businesses, including 8 of the top 10 largest tech companies globally, use Cinch's API to build messaging, email, and calling into their products. And there's something big happening in messaging that product teams need to know about: Rich Communication Services, or RCS. Think of RCS as SMS 2.0. Instead of getting text from a random number, your users will see your verified company name and logo without needing to download anything new. It's a more secure and branded experience. Plus, you get features like interactive carousels and suggested replies. And here's why this matters. US carriers are starting to adopt RCS. Cinch is already helping major brands send RCS messages around the world. And they're helping Lenny's podcast listeners get registered first, before the rush hits the US market. Learn more and get started at cinch.com/Lenny. That's SINCH.com/Lenny. I reached out to Ben Horowitz, who loves what you're doing, a big fan of yours. They're investors, I believe, in.
Yeah, we've known each other for many years. But yes,
Okay,
right
cool.
now they are investors of World Labs.
Amazing. Yeah. Okay, so I asked him what I should ask you about, and he suggested I ask you, why is the bitter lesson alone not likely to work for robots? So first of all, just explain what the bitter lesson was in the history of AI, and then just why that won't get us to where we want to be with robots.
So, well, first of all, there are many bitter lessons, but but the bitter lessons everybody refers to is a paper written by Richard Sutton, who won the Turing Award recently. And he does a lot of reinforcement learning. And Richard has said, right, if you look at the history, especially the algorithmic development of AI, it turns out simpler model with a ton of data always win at the end of the day, instead of the more complex model with less data. I mean, that was actually, this paper came years after ImageNet. That to me was not bitter, it was a sweet lesson. That's why I built ImageNet, because I believe that big data plays that role. So why can bitter lesson work in robotics alone? Well, first of all, I think we need to give credit to where we are today. Robotics is very much in the early days of experimentation. It's not, the research is not nearly as mature as, say, language models. So many people are still experimenting with different algorithms, and some of those algorithms are driven by big data. So I do think big data will continue to play a role in robotics. And but what is hard for robotics? There are a couple of things. One is that it's harder to get data. It's a lot harder to get data. You can say, well, there's web data. This is where the latest robotics research is using web videos. And I think web videos do play a role. But if you think about what made language model work, as someone who does computer vision and spatial intelligence and robotics, I'm very jealous of my colleagues in language, because they had this perfect setup where their training data are in words, eventually tokens, and then they produce a model that outputs words. So you have this perfect alignment between what you hope to get, which we call objective function, and what your training data looks like. But robotics is different. Even spatial intelligence is different. You hope to get actions out of robots, but your training data lacks actions in 3D worlds. And that's what robots have to do, right? Actions in 3D worlds. So you have to find different ways to fit a, what do they call, a square in a round hole. That what we have is tons of web videos. So then we have to start talking about adding, supplementing data such as teleoperation data or synthetic data, so that the robots are trained with this hypothesis of bitter lesson, which is large amount of data. I think there is still hope, because even what we are doing in world modeling will really unlock a lot of this information for robots. But I think we have to be careful, because we're at the early days of this, and bitter lesson is still to be tested, because we haven't fully figured out the data form. Another part of the bitter lesson of robotics I think we should be so realistic about is, again, compared to language models or even spatial models, robots are physical systems. So robots are closer to self-driving cars than a large language model. And that's very important to recognize. That means that in order for robots to work, we not only need brains, we also need the physical body, we also need application scenarios. And if you look at the history of self-driving car, my colleague Sebastian Thrun took Stanford's car to win the first DARPA challenge in 2006 or 2005. It's 20 years since that prototype of a self-driving car being able to drive 130 miles in the Nevada desert to today's Waymo and on the street of San Francisco. And we're not even done yet. There's still a lot. So that's a 20-year journey. And self-driving cars are much simpler robots. They're just metal boxes running on 2D surfaces. And the goal is not to touch anything. Robot is 3D things running in 3D world, and the goal is to touch things. So the journey is going to be, there's many aspects, elements. And of course, one could say, well, the self-driving car early algorithm were pre-deep learning era. So deep learning is accelerating the brains. And I think that's true. That's why I'm in robotics. That's why I'm in spatial intelligence, and I'm excited by it. But in the meantime, the car industry is very mature. And productizing also involves the mature use cases, supply chains, the hardware. So I think it's a very interesting time to work in these problems. But it's true, Ben is right. We might still be subject to a number of bitter lessons.
Doing this work, do you ever just feel awe for the way the brain works and is able to do all of this for us? Just the complexity, just to get a machine to just walk around and not hit things and fall. Does it just give you more respect for what we've already got?
Totally. We operate on about 20 watts. That's dimmer than any light bulb in the room I'm in right now. And yet we can do so much. So I think actually the more I work in AI, the more I respect humans.
Let's talk about this product you just launched called Marble, a very cute name. Talk about what this is, why this is important. I've been playing with it. It's incredible. We'll link to it and for folks to check it out. What is Marble?
Yeah, I'm very excited. So first of all, Marble is one of the first product that World Labs has rolled out. World Labs is a foundation frontier model company. We are founded by 4 co-founders who have deep technical history. My co-founders, Justin Johnson, Christoph Lassner, and Ben Mildenhall. We all come from the research field of AI, computer graphics, computer vision. And we believe that spatial intelligence and world modeling is as important, if not more, to language models and complementary to language models. So we wanted to seize this opportunity to create a deep tech research lab that can connect the dots between frontier models with products. So Marble is an app that's built upon our frontier models. We've spent a year and plus building the world's first generative model that can output genuinely 3D worlds. That's a very, very hard problem. And it was a very hard process. We have a team of founding team of incredible technologists from, incredible teams. And then around just a month or 2 ago, we saw the first time that we can just prompt with a sentence and an image and multiple images and create worlds that we can just navigate in. If you put it on Goggle, which we have an option to let you do that, you can even walk around, right? So it was, even though we've been building this for quite a while, it was still just all inspiring. And we wanted to get into the hands of people who need it. And then we know that so many creators, designers, people who are thinking about robotic simulation, people who are thinking about different use cases of navigable, interactable, immersive worlds, game developers will find this useful. So we developed Marble as a first step. It's again still very early, but it's the world's first model doing this, and it's the world's first product that allows people to just prompt. We call it prompt to worlds.
Well, I've been playing around with it. It is insane. Like you could just have a little Shire world where you just infinitely walk around Middle Earth, basically, and there's no one there yet. But it's insane. You just go anywhere. There's like dystopian world. I'm just looking at all these examples.
Yes.
And my favorite part, actually, I don't know if there's a feature or bug. You can see like the dots of the world before it actually renders with all the textures, and I just love to like you get a glimpse into what is going on with this model. Basically,
That
create
is
like
so cool to hear,
yeah.
because this is where, as a researcher, I'm learning, because the dots that lead you into the world was an intentional feature visualization. It is not part of the model. It's the model actually just generates the world.
Oh,
But
okay.
we were trying to find a way to guide people into the world, and a number of engineers worked on different versions, but we converged on the dot. And so many people, you're not the only one, told us how delightful that experience is. And it was really satisfying for us to hear that this intentional visualization feature, that's not just the big hardcore model, actually has delighted our users.
Wow. So you add that to make it more like to have humans
To
understand what's
have
going on
fun.
more, get more
Yes.
delightful. Wow, that is hilarious. It makes
Yeah.
me think about LLMs and the way it's not the same thing, but they talk about what they're thinking and what they're doing.
Yes, it is. It is.
It also makes me think about just the Matrix. Like
Yeah.
it's exactly the Matrix experience. I don't know if
Yeah.
that was your inspiration.
Well, like I said, a number of engineers worked on that. It
There,
could
yeah,
be their
there,
inspiration.
it's in there. It's in their
Yeah.
it's in their subconscious.
Yeah.
Okay, so just for folks that may want to play around with this, maybe use it. What are some applications today that folks can start using today? What's your goal with this launch?
Yeah, so we do believe that world modeling is very horizontal, but we're already seeing some really exciting use cases. Virtual production for movies, because what they need are 3D uh, worlds that they can align with the camera. So when the actors are acting on it, they can, position the camera and shoot the segments really well. And we're already seeing incredible use. In fact, I don't know if you have seen our launch video showing Marble. It was
Hmm.
produced by a virtual production company. We collaborated with Sony, and they use Marble scenes to shoot those videos. So we were collaborating with those technical artists and directors, and they were saying this has cut our production time by 40x. In fact, it has to be.
40x.
Yes, in
That's a
fact,
lot
it
of
has
X.
to, because we only had 1 month
Wow.
to work on this project, and there were so many things they were trying to shoot. So using Marble really, really significantly accelerated the production of virtual production for VFX and movies. That's one use cases. We are already seeing our users taking our Marble scene and taking the mesh export and putting games, whether it's games on VR or games, just fun games that they have developed. We have had, we're showing an example of robotic simulation, because when I still am a researcher doing robotic training. One of the biggest pain point is to create synthetic data for training robots. And these synthetic data needs to be very diverse. They need to come from different environments with different objects to manipulate. And one path to it is to ask computers to simulate. Otherwise, humans have to, build every single asset for robots. That's just going to take a lot longer. So we already have researchers reaching out and wanting to use Marble to create those synthetic environments. We also have unexpected user outreach in terms of how they want to use Marble. For example, a psychologist team called us to use Marble to do psychology research. It turned out some of the psychiatric patients they study, they need to understand how their brain respond to different immersive scenes of different features. For example, messy scenes or clean scenes or whatever you name it. And it's very hard for researchers to get their hands on these kind of immersive scenes, and it will take them too long and too much budget to create. And Marble is a really almost instantaneous way of getting so many of these experimental environments into their hands. So we're seeing multiple use cases at this point. But the VFX, the game developers, the simulation developers, as well as designers are very excited.
This is very much the way things work in AI. I've had other AI leaders on the podcast, and it's always like put things out there early as soon as you can to discover where the big use cases are. The head of ChatGPT told me how when they first put out ChatGPT, he was just scanning TikTok to see how people were using it and all the things they were talking about. And that's what convinced them where to lean in and help them see how people actually want to use it. I love this last use case of like for therapy. I'm just imagining like heights, people dealing with heights or snakes or spiders, which
it's amazing. A friend of mine last night literally called me and talked about his height scare and asked me if Marble should be used. That's amazing. You went straight there.
That's because I'm imagining all the like the exposure therapy stuff. Like this could be so good for that. That is so cool. Okay, so I should have asked you this before, but I think there's going to be a question of just how does this differ from things like V03 and other video generation models? It's pretty clear to me, but I think it might be helpful just to explain how this is different from all the video AI tools people have seen.
Warlap's thesis is that spatial intelligence is fundamentally very important, and spatial intelligence is not just about videos. In fact, the world is not passively watching videos passing by, right? I love Plato has the allegory of the cave analogy to describe vision. He said that imagine a prisoner tied on his chair, not very humane, but in a cave, watching a full life theater in front of him, but the actual live theater that actors are acting is behind his back. It was just lit so that the projection of the action is on a wall of the cave, and then the task of this prisoner is to figure out what's going on. It's a pretty extreme example, but it really shows, it describes what vision is about, is that to make sense of the 3D world or 4D world out of 2D. So spatial intelligence to me is deeper than only creating that flat 2D world. Spatial intelligence to me is the ability to create, reason, interact, make sense of deeply spatial world, whether it's 2D or 3D or 4D, including dynamics and all that. So World Lab is focusing on that. And of course, the ability to create videos per se could be part of this. And in fact, just a couple of weeks ago, we rolled out the world's first real-time demoable real-time video generation on a single H100 GPU. So we part of our technology includes that. But I think Marble is very different because we really want creators, designers, developers to have in their hands a model that can give them worlds with 3D structure so they can use it for their work. And that's why Marble is so different.
The way I see it is it's a platform for a ton of opportunity
Yes.
to do stuff. As you describe, videos are just like, here's a one-off video that's very fun and cool, and that's it, and you move on.
By the way, in Marble, we could allow people to export in video form. So you could actually, like you said, you go into a world. So let's say it's a Hobbit cave. You can actually, especially as a creator, you have such a specific way of moving the camera in a trajectory in the director's mind, right? And then you can export that from Marble into a video.
What does it take to create something like this? Just like, how big is the team? How many GPUs you work in? Like, anything you can share there. I don't know how much of this is private information, but just what does it take to create something like this that you've launched here?
It takes a lot of brain power. So we just talk about 20 watts per brain. It's so from that point of view, it's a small number, but it's actually an incredible, it's 500 million years of evolution to give us those power. We have a team of 30-ish people now, and we are predominantly researchers and research engineers, but we also have designers and product. We actually really believe that we want to create a company that's anchored in the deep tech of spatial intelligence, but we are actually building serious products. So we have this integration of R&D and productization, and of course we use a ton of GPUs. That's the technical Jensen term. Happy to hear.
Well, congrats on the launch. I know this is a huge milestone. I know this took a ton of work.
Thank
so
you.
I just want to say congrats to you and your team. Let me talk about your founder journey for a moment. So you're a founder of this company. You started how many years ago? A couple years ago? 2-3 years ago?
A year ago.
A year
plus.
ago. A year? Okay.
18 months. Yeah.
Okay. What's something you wish you knew before you started this that you wish you could like whisper into the ear of Fei-Fei of 18 months ago?
Well, I continue to wish I know the future of technology. I think actually that's one of our founding advantage, is that we see the future earlier in general than most people. But still, man, this is so exciting and so amazing that what's unknown and what's coming. But I know the reason you're asking me this question is not about the future of technology. You're probably more, look, I did not start a company of this scale at 20-year-old. So, I started a dry cleaner when I was 19, but that's a little smaller scale.
We got to talk about that.
And then I, funded Google Cloud AI, and then I founded an institute at Stanford, but those are different beasts. I did feel I was a little more prepared as a founder of the grinding journey that I compared to maybe the 20-year-old founders, but I'm surprised and it puts me into paranoia sometimes that how intensely competitive AI landscape is from the model, the technology itself, as well as talents. And, when I founded the company, we did not have these incredible stories of how much certain talents would cost, So these are things that continue to surprise me, and I have to be very alert about.
So the competition you're talking about is, the competition for talent, the speed at which how things are moving.
Yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned this point that I want to come back to, that if you just look over the course of your career, you were like at all of the major collections of humans that led to so many of the breakthroughs that are happening today. Obviously, we talk about ImageNet, also just SAIL at Stanford is where a lot of the work happened. Google Cloud, which a lot of the breakthroughs happened. What brought you to those places? Like for people looking for how to advance in their career, be at the center of the future, just like, is there a through line there of just what pulled you from place to place and pulled you into those groups that might be helpful for people to hear?
Yeah, this is actually a great question, Lenny, because I do think about it. And obviously, we talked about it's curiosity and passion that brought me to AI. That is more a scientific North Star, right? I did not care if AI was a thing or not. So that was one part. But how did I end up choosing in the particular places I work in, including starting World Labs, is I think I'm very grateful to myself or maybe to my parents' genes. I'm an intellectually very fearless person. And I have to say, when I hire young people, I look for that because I think that's a very important quality if one wants to make a difference, is that when you want to make a difference, you have to accept that you're creating something new or you're diving into something new. People haven't done that. And if you have that self-awareness, you almost have to allow yourself to be fearless and to be courageous. So when I, for example, came to Stanford, in the world of academia, I was very close to this thing called tenure, which is, have the job forever at Princeton. But I chose to come to Stanford because I love Princeton. It's my alma mater. It's just at that moment, there are people who are so amazing at Stanford, and the Silicon Valley ecosystem was so amazing that I was okay to take a risk of restarting my tenure clock. Going to becoming the first female director of SAIL, I was actually, relatively speaking, a very young faculty at that time. And I wanted to do that because I care about that community. I didn't spend too much time thinking about all the failure cases. Obviously, I was very lucky that the more senior faculty supported me, but I just wanted to make a difference. And then going to Google was similar. I wanted to work with people like Jeff Dean, Jeff Hinton, and all these incredible Dennis, the incredible people. So the same with World Labs. I have this passion, and I also believe that people with the same mission can do incredible things. So that's how it guided my through line. I don't overthink of all possible things that can go wrong because that's too many.
I feel like that's an important element of this, is not focusing on the downside, focusing more on the people, the mission, what gets you excited, what do you think, and curiosity.
I do want to say one thing to all the young talents in AI, the engineers, the researchers out there, because some of you apply to World Labs. I feel very privileged you considered World Labs. I do find many of the young people today think about every single aspect of an equation when they decide on jobs. At some point, maybe that's the way they want to do it. But sometimes I do want to encourage young people to focus on what's important, because I find myself constantly in mentoring mode when I talk to job candidates, not necessarily recruiting or not recruiting, but just in mentoring mode when I see an incredible young talent who is over focusing on every minute dimension and aspect of considering a job, when maybe the most important thing is, where's your passion? Do you align with the mission? Do you believe and have faith in this team? and just focus on the impact and you can make and the kind of work and team you can work with.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough for people in the AI space now. There's just so much at them, so much news, so much happening, so much FOMO.
That's
I
true.
could see the stress. And so I think that advice is really important. Just like what will actually make you feel fulfilled in what you're doing, not just where's the fastest growing company, who's going to win. I don't know. I want to make sure I ask you about the work you're doing today at Stanford at the HCI. I think it's the
HAI.
HAI, Human Centered AI Institute. What are you doing there? I know this is a thing you do on the side still.
So yes, HAI, Human Centered AI Institute, was co-founded by me and a group of faculty like Professor John H. Mundy, Professor James Landy, um, Professor Chris Manning back in 2018. I was actually finishing my last sabbatical at Google, and it was a very, very important decision for me because I could have stayed in industry, but my time at Google taught me one thing is AI is going to be a civilizational technology. And it dawned on me how important this is to humanity, to the point that I actually wrote a piece in New York Times that year, 2018, to talk about the need for a guiding framework to develop and to apply AI. And that framework has to be anchored in human benevolence, is human centeredness. And I felt that Stanford, one of the world's top university in the heart of Silicon Valley, that gave birth to important companies from NVIDIA to Google, should be a thought leader to create this human-centered AI framework and to actually embody that in our research, education, and policy and in ecosystem work. So I founded HAI. After fast forward after 6-7 years, it has become the world's largest AI institute that does human-centered research, education, ecosystem outreach, and policy impact. It involves hundreds of faculty across all 8 schools at Stanford, from medicine to education to sustainability to business to engineering to humanities to law. And we support researchers, especially at the interdisciplinary area, from digital economy to legal studies to political science to discovery of new drugs to new algorithms that's beyond transformers. We also actually put a very strong focus on policy, because when we started HAI, I realized that Silicon Valley did not talk to Washington, D.C. or Brussels or other parts of the world. And it's given how important this technology is, we need to bring everybody on board. So we created multiple programs, from Congressional Bootcamp to AI Index report to policy briefing. And we especially participated in policy making, including advocating for a national AI research cloud bill that was passed in the first Trump administration, and participating in state level regulatory AI discussions. So there's a lot we did, and I continue to be one of the leaders, even though I'm much less involved operationally, because I care not only we create this technology, but we use it in the right way.
Wow. I was not aware of all that other work you were doing. As you're talking, I was reminded Charlie Munger had this quote, take a simple idea and take it very seriously. I feel like you've done that in so many different ways and stayed with it. And it's unbelievable the impact that you've had in so many ways over the years. I'm going to skip the lightning round, and I'm just going to ask you one last question. Is there anything else that you wanted to share? Anything else you want to leave listeners with?
I'm very excited by AI Lenny. I want to answer one question that when I travel around the world, everybody asks me is that if I'm a musician, if I'm a teacher, middle school teacher, if I'm a nurse, if I'm an accountant, if I'm a farmer, do I have a role in AI, or is AI just going to take over my life or my work? And I think this is the most important question of AI. And I find that in Silicon Valley, we tend not to speak heart to heart with people like us, and not like us in Silicon Valley, but like all of us. We tend to just toss around words like infinite productivity or infinite leisure time or infinite power or whatever. But at the end of the day, AI is about people. And when people ask me that question, it's a resounding yes. Everybody has a role in AI. It depends on what you do and what you want, but no technology should take away human dignity. And the human dignity and agency should be at the heart of the development, the deployment, as well as the governance of every technology. So if you are a young artist and your passion is storytelling, embrace AI as a tool. In fact, embrace Marble. I hope it becomes a tool for you, because the way you tell your story is unique, and the world still needs it. But how you tell your story, how do you use the most incredible tool to tell your story in the most unique way is important. And that voice needs to be heard. If you're a farmer near retirement, AI still matters because you're a citizen. You can participate in your community. You should have a voice in how AI is used, how AI is applied. You work with people that you can encourage all of you to use AI to make life easier for you. If you're a nurse, I hope you know that at least in my career, I have worked so much in healthcare research because I feel our healthcare workers should be greatly augmented and helped by AI technology, whether it's smart cameras to feed more information or robotic assistance, because our nurses are overworked, over fatigued, and as our society ages, we need more help for people to be taken care of. So AI can play that role. So I just want to say that it's so important that even a technologist like me are sincere about that everybody has a role in AI.
What a beautiful way to end it. Such a tie back to where we started about how it's up to us and take individual responsibility for what AI will do in our lives. Final question, where can folks find Marble? Where can they go maybe try to join World Labs if they want to? What's the website? Where do people go?
Well, World Labs website is www.worldlabs.ai, and you can find our research progress there. We have technical blogs. You can find Marble the product there. You can sign in there. You can find our job posts link there. You can we're in San Francisco. We love to work with the world's best talents.
Amazing. Fei-Fei, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Lenny.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. If you found this valuable, you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Also, please consider giving us a rating or leaving a review, as that really helps other listeners find the podcast. You can find all past episodes or learn more about the show at lennyspodcast.com. See you in the next episode.
The game is a layering game. It's a sequential game. Which one will you introduce first? And how can you layer the next one on top of it? So if you're sales-led now, if you continue being sales-led, you have a high chance of leaving product-led to be disrupted by it from the bottoms up. But also going from sales-led to product-led does not mean you have to abandon sales-led. That means you have to hunker down on your sales-led and overlay product-led on top of it to amplify already existing growth, never to switch. So in the most successful companies, whether they go from product-led to sales-led to sales-led to product-led, they're able to execute both correctly and together, as opposed to saying I have to switch or pick one versus the other. And I think it's the biggest mistake when people view it as a decision-making of which one I should be versus a sequential play.
Elena Verna is possibly the single most experienced and smartest person on growth strategy in the entire world. I am not being hyperbolic. Elena led growth at Miro, SurveyMonkey, and now at Amplitude. And she's worked with companies like MongoDB, Netlify, and HP to help them figure out their growth strategies. In our chat, we cover B2B growth strategies, what's changing in B2B growth, why freemium is usually a better path than going trial, why every company should be thinking about their product-led growth strategy, how product-led growth often gets crushed as you move up market and how to avoid that, the emergence of product-led sales and how that might be the future of growth, and also how to hire your first growth lead. My brain is always buzzing after I talk to Elena, and I suspect yours will too. Enjoy the episode. This episode is brought to you by Persona. Persona helps founders, product managers, and engineers easily solve any identity-related problem, including handling KYC, AML, and basically all manner of identity fraud. You can integrate Persona in an afternoon and personalize your flows using their SDK to meet your users on any device. Persona's identity building blocks allow you to manage your entire end-to-end onboarding flow, verifying that each new user and their data are legitimate. Persona is trusted by both startups and the world's largest companies, including Square, BlockFi, Gusto, and Udemy. And for a limited time, Persona is offering listeners of this podcast a free end-to-end KYC and AML solution where you can collect the user's government ID and or their selfie and automatically verify that those two pieces of data are legitimate. You can also enrich that information to automatically see if the person exists on various watch lists. Just go to withpersona.com/Lenny to get started. Do you want to reduce friction in your onboarding flow? Then let me tell you about Stitch, and that's Stitch with a Y. Stitch is on a mission to eliminate friction from the internet. They're starting by making user authentication and onboarding more seamless and more secure. They offer super flexible, out-of-the-box authentication solutions for companies of all sizes, from email magic links to SMS passcodes, one-tap social logins to even biometrics. Stitch is your all-in-one platform for authentication. Stitch customers have been able to increase conversion by over 60% after spending just one day integrating. And with their API and SDKs, you can improve user conversion and retention and security, all while saving valuable engineering time. Your engineers will come and thank you for using Stitch, because Stitch keeps you from having to build authentication in-house, and the integration process is super fast and super smooth. To get $1,000 in free credits, just go to stitch.com, and that's Stitch with a Y, and sign up and just mention that I sent you. Elena, welcome to the podcast. I've been so looking forward to our conversation, and especially all the things that listeners are going to get to learn from you and that I'm going to get to learn. And so thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited.
I'm more excited. So I was browsing your LinkedIn in preparation for our chat, and it's pretty unreal. You have such an incredible variety of experiences. As far as I can count, you've worked with 17 different companies, possibly more. And as far as I can tell, it's kind of between you and Casey Winters for who's worked with more companies on their growth strategy. And I think you're winning.
It's not a competition or anything. No.
It's how many items can you add to LinkedIn that are awesome? So for all those reasons, I'm really excited to dig into a bunch of different stuff. But before we do that, can you just kind of, for context, walk folks through your career path, just kind of at a high level?
Absolutely. So first of all, I've never If you asked me this question 10 years ago and said, well, will you be in 10 years? I would have never said that this is what I'll be doing, advising interim level engagement, board level seats. So it's been definitely a journey of discovery and very strategic pivots in my career that I had an opportunity to take. I started my life in data. So I was a data analyst in the very early stages of my career. I graduated with statistics degree from UC Berkeley, which is a California university in the United States. And I went into data analytics. I actually thought I was going to be an actuary when I graduated. So that person that calculates your insurance rates. But in order to progress in the actuary field, you have to continue taking exams. And I was not a really big fan of taking exams as a means of validation of whether I'm good or not. So I went into data analytics. I started in a very large company, Safeway, which is a grocery chain here in the United States. I very quickly realized that their velocity does not match my expectations of how quickly I want to move. And by some stroke of luck, I've applied for SurveyMonkey on Craigslist, and I pursued them for over 8 months, trying to get me to take me as their first data hire in the company. They had me and another candidate that they couldn't decide between. And this is something that the most grit and the most time I've put into land at some position where I was just very determined based on all of my conversations with the leadership team there that it's going to be a great place for learning and doing for me. So finally, I got the job, which is amazing. And I grew up in data at the beginning. So I got to senior data analyst, manager, director. So I very much focused on proficiency in data field. However, at that time, there was no such thing as chief data officer. So it was very unclear to me as to where can I go from here. Director of analytics is kind of where most of the jobs would cap out if they were data specific. So I was very proactive in managing up and saying to my bosses, I want more, give me opportunity to learn more. And I've had a fantastic team that I built a succession plan on that was functioning almost independently. So my first branch out of analytics when SurveyMonkey wanted to start product marketing as a function. And they said, well, do you want to start it? I'm like, I have no idea what product marketing is, but let's go figure it out. I hired a first product marketer that was clearly so much better than me. And she was understanding things quicker. She was doing things quicker. And I quickly realized that product marketing was not my superpower where I should continue expanding. However, this concept of growth was starting to creep in Silicon Valley and already prototype growth from the perspective that we had a very substantial data infrastructure and we're very data driven in our understanding of the business. And we had some product managers on core team that already started experimenting and were finding the gaps between perception and reality that existed already in the product. So when we started growth team, at first I was very apprehensive. Why would you need a growth team in a company? Isn't it everybody's responsibility to grow? So I squarely believe that growth is going to be one of those Silicon Valley myths and hypes that is going to fizz away in a couple of years. But opportunity was there to go and experiment and make changes in the product. And to somebody in the data analytics roots that are constantly irking to actually go and implement based on the findings they find in data, I took on that opportunity. I started with growth product and I product managed. I was the first growth product manager at that time. And then I had an opportunity to hire more people. And then I transitioned into growth marketing as well. So in SurveyMonkey, I was running growth marketing, growth product, and analytics, which is a perfect trio in order to be the most impactful in growth in our marketing product-led motions against growth model. Afterwards, I had a fairly short stint at Malwarebytes, which is a cybersecurity company where I was their head of consumer product. So I ran the entire business unit from design to marketing to product to analytics in order to deliver on the consumer revenue expectations. Afterwards, my trajectory was I wanted another full-time role, but I didn't know how to interview for leadership level positions. This was my first step into advising. Try before you buy. Let me actually figure out different teams, different industries, what is there that will have a good fit for me? Because I was trying to optimize on the retention in my career, not necessarily just catching a nice new logo. And I wanted to be happy. I wanted to apply my superpowers and make a big impact in the company. And advising was looking like it was going to promise me all that, and that was going to be my selection criteria for the next full-time role. I was lucky enough to sign some incredible companies very early on, such as Miro, which actually invited me to my first interim gig. They needed a marketing leader that was very growth marketing focused, and they were looking for full-time. I was not looking for full-time at that time because I was just early in my advising journey. So I started as an interim CMO there. Very quickly, that became one of the most fascinating journeys because as a marketing leader, I had to take the team through a COVID transition because COVID hit 3 months after I took on the interim gig at Miro. And I stayed there for 11 months, and it's been a fascinating learning experience. And then I went back to advising after we filled the position and brought in an incredible marketing leader that can take the company forward. So afterwards, I thought, well, why am I chasing full-time dream? I have an incredible opportunity in front of me to do advising, which I absolutely love, which is just a massive pattern matching and data gathering exercise where I'm running large experiments across all of these companies, able to figure out frameworks of what works and what doesn't. When I get my operator itch and the lack of accountability, I take an interim gig. And interim gigs are fascinating because I take a leadership level role. I help company understand what type of leader they need to bring in. I keep the bus moving in the meantime, as well as I succeed myself and I bring the leadership after me and transition myself out. So it's a win-win on both positions because I get my accountability weight, the company gets a good hire, I transition back into my advising role and live my lifestyle use case afterwards. So since then, I've taken 3 interim gigs. My first one was at Miro as their interim CMO. Then I was at Netlify as their head of growth, and now at Amplitude as their interim head of growth. But advising is really my North Star right now and what I'm really building for.
Wow, that was incredible. It's so interesting to think about how becoming a leader at a company like, say, Amplitude or Miro, it kind of starts a lot of times with being an advisor. Is that something you find is common? That's kind of how you get to be one of those, to a role like that?
I think the path, it's not a traditional path. Most of the time you go through leadership recruiting agency or the CEO reaches out to you and asks you to interview. However, I think that's the most broken way to hire for leadership. You're making such a big bet on the company, and your bet on the company is actually a lot riskier than companies bet on you. They can let you go and move on. For you, it makes up your career large chunk of your career that you're going to be accountable for a long time. So I think that there is a lot of mismatches that are happening on leadership level, and tenures of leaders are shrinking because we are optimized on both sides during recruiting process to sell rainbows and unicorns and butterflies, that everything is beautiful and this is match made in heaven. And either side is afraid to talk about problems that exist and understand whether they're going to be the right match to try to solve those problems. So it's not a traditional way to get into a leadership role, but I think if you're optimizing for retention in your leadership role, it's the best way to do try before you buy. Whether you start as an advisor, whether you first take it as an interim, and then after that trial period, then you actually convert to a paid full-time contract. So I advocate for that, but it's definitely not the norm, but I hope to see it one day.
I love how you think about your career a little bit like a product-led growth freemium model.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's the best way to continuously apply those frameworks across all of the parts of your life.
Oh my God, that's so meta. A question I've been curious about is, of the places that you've worked at and with, which would you say has been the most fulfilling to you, and then also maybe the most challenging?
Most fulfilling, as hands down, has been my time at SurveyMonkey. I stayed there for almost 7.5 years. I grew up in that company. I had my teenage years there. I had my graduation there. So the fulfillment comes to me from growing with the company together, adjusting to the new challenges, adjusting to the market. That's where the most learning comes from. That's where the most ability for you to understand how to succeed and how to evolve comes from. So hands down, that has been the most fulfilling experience, and I have not been able to top it since. Most challenging, on the other hand, has definitely been with Miro. Just because coming into a hyper-growth company, it's a challenge within itself, because in order for you to continuously stay in your position, you have to grow faster than the company, or at least keep up with their growth. And Miro has definitely been on a tear. And plus, with the COVID hitting in the midst of my tenure as a leader there on the marketing side and having to go through the full repositioning, remessaging exercise and adjusting all of our go-to-market tactics, it's been the most demanding, stressful, but at the same time gratifying experience that I've ever had.
I find there's often a correlation between those two things that are maybe the most challenging in the moment and that end up being the most fulfilling down the road. For folks that are maybe in the middle of that, is that your experience too?
Yes, there's different challenges across different areas. When you're still growing up in your career and you're moving up the leadership ladder, challenge stays of not switching careers, but staying and grinding it out and seeing that progression. That's the most challenging and gratifying area there. And it comes with most fulfillment because your titles are your grades of how well you've performed and how quickly you were able to escalate to the next level. However, once you're in the leadership level, I think the most fulfilling is be able to see a challenge and be able to take the company through that challenge onto the other side. Because leadership has its positive sides of fancy title and maybe financial security, but it also has its dark sides of hitting business challenges and having to shift and move team in the right direction and influence company in the right way. And that's the most gratifying, I think, on the leadership level.
One more question around your career. Do you find yourself more drawn to the product, kind of head of product kind of direction, or more of a growth-oriented direction?
I don't know how to answer that question. Growth is part of product. In product, there's different specialties. There's innovators, there's core product managers, there's infrastructure technical product managers, there's growth product managers. Am I a growth product manager? Absolutely, in some capacity. But I'm also a growth marketer because I think both marketing-led and product-led aspects have to be working at the same time. But it's very confusing to the market because the two main functions are CPO or CMO. Well, somebody who's something in between is not a very well-defined space. And this is why I think growth leadership as a whole has a lot of challenges to it because the leadership career ladders have not caught up with what growth professionals are actually doing.
Interesting. Okay, so we've been talking a lot about growth. I'd love to dive in to a few topics around growth. You've spent most of your career in B2B growth, and especially like product-led, bottom-up sort of growth companies like Miro, SurveyMonkey, Mongo, Amplitude. And so 2 questions. One is just, what is it about B2B growth that keeps pulling you in versus consumer products? Because oftentimes that's where people want to go, where it's like shiny and exciting. And then 2, what have you seen change most in B2B product growth strategy? What's getting harder? What's getting easier? That kind of thing.
Great question. I think B2B products can be and should be shiny and fun. The question is why aren't they? Why have B2B space evolved in such a different way compared to B2C? Well, B2C product, you have to be shiny and exciting because you're marketing to user directly. In B2B, we've created the superficial ladder that enterprise buyer makes the decision for B2B products. And they're not looking for shine, they're looking for utility, they're looking for efficiency. They're looking to solve a problem for their organization, but they're not even the users of the product in the first place. So the first wave of B2B products has been these cold interfaces, these enterprise feature checklists, these unusable products that anytime a user goes into it, they cannot wait to get out of it because they're not the ones making a decision. They're not the ones actually signing the check. They submitted their requirements elsewhere. What's amazing is that that's starting to break down. And in the last decade, that has changed tremendously. So now most of the decision-making power of what's going to be used in B2B has been pushed back on prosumer, on that employee to make that choice. So a lot of the new wave of B2B products are shiny and fun. And they're consumer-like in terms of how they work, what feelings they invoke in you, how much habits they built with you, and how much they're part of your life. So I'm excited to work in B2B because we're finally correcting the industry. Instead of going and fulfilling some enterprise blind checklist, we're actually working towards creating fantastic experiences and not only working it from efficient, now we're working on effectiveness. It's not that I'm able to do the job at the good cost, it's that I'm able to make it better and then make your life better. You as an employee, you will be better. You'll be more productive. You'll be more powerful. You'll be more successful. And I love that transition is happening. I think we have so much to learn from B2C space. And I'm very excited that we're finally have moved into direction of consumerization of B2B.
What are some examples of B2B products consumerization? Is it like an onboarding experience? Is it the design? What are some elements that you found to be effective for bringing consumer experiences into B2B?
It's all about customer centricity, but it's redefining who customer is. Before, customer was an enterprise buyer. So you build for that buyer to be able to see the features. Now we're redefining customer to be a user. So now we're actually building for our users. It does start from onboarding. It does start from your time to value. It does start from your activation experience, the habit loops that can be built on top of it. It's all encompassing. It's measured by your affinity and advocacy on the product, your NPS of the product if you want to stand up word of mouth loops. But it's the redefinition of the user centricity that is driving it. And you have so many examples of it. I think some of the famous ones are Slack. Slack just blew away through enterprise because they built for users, not for enterprise buyers. And buyers were cornered to make that decision as opposed to choosing Slack for their organization. Not a single enterprise buyer I know has ever chosen a Slack for their organizations. People have spoken. Same thing for Miro. It's fantastic to see that people actually bring those softwares in the product, in the company saying, I will collaborate better. I'll be more effective if we have this solution. And enterprise buyers do pay up because they already see utilization happening upfront. Amplitude is going through the same wave that traditional, hey, your head of data buys analytics product for you. It's starting from bottoms up and that user adoption first, which is fascinating to see. And the more industries and more products go through this evolution, the better it is for us, the users, because they're actually going to build solving our problems as opposed to solving checklists of security, data storage, and compliance.
We're circling around these ideas, product-led, bottom-up, just to kind of give people a baseline definition. How do you think about the idea? What is product-led versus bottom-up? Do you think of them synonymously usually? And what else should people be thinking about when they're thinking about these kinds of topics?
Product-led to me is a very specific definition of being product-led in your growth model. So in your growth model, you have to answer 3 questions: how to acquire, how to retain, and how to monetize your customers. You can be product-led, marketing-led, sales-led across all or one of those questions. You get to pick which motion that you're going to go ahead with it. When we're talking about bottoms up, we're talking specifically around acquisition and monetization levers. So bottoms up fundamentally means that you are leveraging your usage to generate leads for sales. Synonymous to it comes out with product-led. Product-led is a version of bottoms up. In the way bottoms up is just going through rebranding of being product-led, where you're actually putting pressure on product to generate the leads. So in the traditional bottoms up, sales or product generates the leads for you and generates the pipeline. In product-led specifically, you are banking on those hand raisers. You are banking on the product qualification criteria that gets you closer to closing that enterprise level contract.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And something that I imagine you see and that I definitely see is companies always want to be product-led. B2B companies, there's like, we're going to try to be product-led. And they start off thinking they're going to be product-led. Obviously, it's cheaper, grow faster, everything kind of gets better. I'm curious if there's downsides, but let's put that on the side for a moment. And then a lot of these startups realize they can't really work product-led as far as they can tell, and they start building a sales team sooner than they expected. Do you have any advice for founders starting a company that helps them understand, is it likely that they can build a product-led growth motion, or is it likely that they're going to have to be sales-driven in the end?
So my question would first be, which lever are you applying product-led technique to? So are you product-led across acquisition, across retention, monetization, all, or 2 out of 3 or 1 out of 3? I think every single company has to first focus on being product-led and retention, period. The only way that you will ever have any chance of acquisition being product-led is if you nail your product-led retention. Let me break it down. Retention falls into 2 main KPIs, which is activation and then engagement. If your product is not able to activate and, more importantly, engage via habitual loops and be in the habit-forming zone, then you'll have no chance to hooking an acquisition engine into your product. Because acquisition and product-led means users invite or users refer or users create content that attracts other users. Well, if your users are not habitually using your product, there's less and less opportunities for you to actually create any sort of product-led acquisition. So never start with product-led acquisition. You first always have to start with product-led retention, activation, and engagement. Then you can choose, is your product has a relationship of one-to-many? If it has a collaboration at its core, say Slack or Miro, or even Amplitude, or does it have more of a single mode relationship? So let's say Snowflake. There's not one-to-many relationships there between users. Well, if you have one-to-many relationships, product-led is a fantastic way for you to prototype that model. If you don't have them, then it becomes increasingly hard. And most of the B2B products don't have that one-to-many relationship, so it's very difficult to stand up product-led acquisition. So you rely on marketing-led and sales-led, and that's fantastic. Those are fantastic growth models as well. The only other question becomes in the self-serve monetization. That's product-led. Otherwise, you go in the sales-led, and you chase after those large contract values. And you can still be product-led and monetization with sales team via product-led sales, or you can just be self-serve if you have a specific segment that is valuable for. But the question there is your use cases and your market matureness to handle self-serve, or do you need that sales touch? Every industry and every sector is going through transformation at different velocities. So even if you don't have that product-led sales or self-serve in your industry now, I guarantee you it will pop up in the next 10 years. And if you're not going to introduce it, you will get disrupted by it.
Say a company starts sales-led on acquisition. By the way, I love how you're kind of expanding this, what seemingly is a binary idea of product-led versus sales-led. Like everyone's always talking about them in such simplistic terms. And just your way of thinking about it, where it's kind of this like, I don't know, 3x3 almost. It's just bending my brain. So I'm going to try to keep up. So say a company starts sales-led on acquisition and later wants to think about adding a product-led self-serve motion. Do you find that that often works, doesn't work? Is that like a rare success story, or how have you seen that happen?
I think in order to succeed and own the market, you have to do both. It's not a question of it working. It's the question of how you will make it work. The game is a layering game. It's a sequential game. Which one will you introduce first? And how can you layer the next one on top of it? So if you're sales-led now, if you continue being sales-led, you have a high chance of leaving product-led to be disrupted by it from the bottoms up. But also going from sales-led to product-led does not mean you have to abandon sales-led. That means you have to hunker down on your sales-led and overlay product-led on top of it to amplify already existing growth, never to switch. So in the most successful companies, whether they go from product-led to sales-led to sales-led to product-led, they're able to execute both correctly and together, as opposed to saying I have to switch or pick one versus the other. And I think it's the biggest mistake when people view it as a decision-making of which one I should be versus a sequential play.
That makes life so much simpler, knowing that eventually you're going to do both. It's basically a question, where do you start? I know you have some strong opinions about kind of how product-led often gets crushed by sales being added down the road. Is there something you can share around that problem you see?
Yes, I see a very clear pattern, and it's sad that so many companies fall into that pattern, even though it's so prominent and the learnings, unfortunately, don't get shared and propagated enough. You start as a product-led company. You get the user love. They talk about you. You have word of mouth loop happening. You have community happening. You have great retention. You're ready to monetize. You monetize self-serve and you get fantastic traction. You start aggregating multiple users within an organization, starting to get inch closer and closer to your first enterprise contract, and it closes. And that's exciting. It's a big ACV, average contract value. It's exhilarating. It's addicting. How many more of those do we have to close? Instead of doing these $10, $20, $30 ARPAs, what if we have $100,000, $200,000 ARPAs? How fast can we grow? You start doubling down and saying, let's just hire more salespeople. We have all of this usage. Let's put productivity per sales head, put that in the forecast, hire salespeople. Let's go. At the beginning, everything is unicorns and roses because you have very strong usage. You have great advocates. Your enterprise buyers are likely already in your user base. So you're going and you're closing them. But then slowness occurs. It always occurs because you run out of enterprise buyers in your user base, because only 30% or less times is your buyer going to be in your user base, which means that the rest of the accounts, usage is happening and it's the correct usage that is leading to enterprise conversation. But you need to go find the buyer because the user does not have a relationship with the buyer. That's when you're starting to go up the market. You realize that. You start hiring enterprise marketing team, demand gen team. You start investing into enterprise marketing activities. You seem to be connecting the dots and your pipeline is taking on next level of growth. And you're starting to close even larger deals. You probably remember the first time that you closed your first 200, 500,000, $1 million deal. And that's exciting. But then at the result of going and chasing after those enterprise buyers, most of the companies make crucial mistake of letting go of their product usage growth, of their product-led tactics, because you still have to make prioritization in your resourcing. Do you hire a PM or do you hire an enterprise rep? Do you hire a growth PM or growth marketer, or do you hire an ABM specialist? And most of the time, when you're chasing after those enterprise buyers, those personas don't overlap. So you have to choose one or the other. So you hire for enterprise because that's what you're doubling down on. That's what your board, that's what market wants from you. Those contracts, large contracts and commitments, that increases your valuation. However, very quickly, you will realize that even your sales-led inbound of going on top of usage is going to start drying up, because if you're not putting continuous pressure on growing those user growth, of driving that community, of driving that user habitual loops, even on self-serve monetization, your enterprise will not grow. If that was the root of your growth, if that was your original DNA. And if you let go of that, and I would say 80% of the companies let go of your product-led initiatives in order of enterprise, they start seeing a massive slowdown in enterprise pipe. Many correct, and they realize that they've forgotten the hand that feeds them in the first place, and they reinvest into that growth. Many companies decide to pivot and say, forget product-led, we're too far gone. Now we're going to create a sales top-down machine. And we're going to go and hunt those enterprise buyers and be good at it. But that requires a very different org structure that creates a very different profiles of people that you need and the different types of running a business and expectation. So it's a dangerous turn for a lot of the companies. I just wish that businesses would never forget the roots that they came from, especially if they started in PLG, and have a sense of when to swing the pendulum to the right direction and correct it when it's the right time.
This episode is brought to you by PostHog. PostHog offers a suite of product analysis tools, including funnels, heat maps, session recording, and experimentation, all in one easy-to-use platform. PostHog is open source, so you can host it on your own infrastructure, which means that you have control over who has access to your data and makes regulatory compliance a breeze, because you don't need to send user info to third parties. PostHog's app system works seamlessly with your data warehouse, both for importing and exporting data, which enables you to bring your data into one place and easily understand user behavior across a range of touchpoints. If you'd like to learn more, check them out at posthog.com/Lenny. Wow, you're such a good storyteller. That was a gripping journey of a potentially failing company. Not to throw anyone under the bus, but are there companies that you've seen do this out there?
I would actually say almost every single company does it. I've seen it done at SurveyMonkey, where we weren't chasing after enterprise, go to a market expansion, and we let go of growth, and then we overcorrected. I've seen it done to some capacity at Netlify, at Amplitude. Every company goes through some flavor of it. It's not actually a measure of a failed business. It's overcorrecting on a go-to-market motion or over-focusing on one. So you're playing replacement game, not a layering sequential game. And Most of them realize and they're able to correct and not necessarily skip a beat. Some of them take too long to correct, and then they enter dreaded complete slowdown in growth, where they need a complete reinvention of the growth model because competition has entered space and they've allowed it to. And that's when it leads to the downturn. But quick realization of it comes almost with every business. Just watch out for those signs of slowness and don't push just your sales and marketing to fix it if your origin was really just in product-led adoption.
Is there anything else you can suggest to founders that are listening to this and they're like, oh man, I want to avoid this? What else should they be doing, focusing on, protecting to not kind of crush PLG as they go up market?
So the downfall of PLG, if you look at it on the outside, is your first sales deal that you're going to close is going to be lower in value. Why? Because you most likely entered that account a lot earlier than you would have had if you went in a sales top-down approach. So ACVs are not comparable. So don't look at your ACV or average contract value in PLG, in self-serve, or even product-led and compare it to sales top-down. Those are apples and oranges, and they cannot be looked at the same way. PLG and product-led sales is an expansion game. It's not a land at the most from the beginning. And you need to incentivize your team correctly. You need to understand that you're coming in a lot earlier in the game. And the second of all is overcorrection that I see is where the product roadmap starts to focus exclusively on enterprise features. So now we'll suddenly have a track that is only building for enterprise buyers. That should be your whole telltale sign that you've let go of your user growth, because you constantly have to innovate and delight your users in order for them to be the selling agent within the organization. And the moment you start building for enterprise buyers, I would have another look at your strategy and understand whether you're building for the right persona if you're in the roots of PLG.
Got it. You mentioned product-led sales, and that's something I definitely wanted to touch on. It's kind of this emerging trend, product-led sales, where you kind of layer sales on top of product-led growth. What's your general take on this trend? Where do you think it'll go? How should companies think about it?
I think product-led sales in the future, I'll give it another 10 years, will box out sales-led organizations, or top-down, I should say, organizations. So product-led sales will box out top-down sales. Why? Because product-led sales focuses on user value that is going to drive expansion to you. Product-led sales has incredible cost of acquisition because it's a cost acquisition of a user, not a buyer, which is a lot cheaper. Product-led sales focuses on pipeline creation that is usage as opposed to marketing qualified leads. So you start with usage, and that drives additional hooks into your growth model. It creates additional opportunities for you to drive more acquisition, more retention, more product building, more discovery of adjacent use cases, and understanding how market is evolving. So just like already seeing self-serve even go up in value, you can see Atlassian closing 200K deals self-serve. I've myself paid for Drift a couple of years back of over $24,000 a year, self-serve on a credit card without talking to anybody. Product-led sales is a one step forward to say, we're going to empower users to make that decision and be our sales agents, and we're going to push the pressure of sales on product, aka your users. Enterprise buyers are getting boxed out of that decision-making process. And honestly, I think it's better for everybody. Not to say that enterprise buyers don't hold a very important value in the company, upholding the budgets and monitoring the spend, which is cost bases and unit economics of the business, but the decision-making has moved to user. And if user is making your decisions, product-led sales is the best way to capture that intent.
Wow, what a prediction. Just to set a little foundation, could you just briefly describe what you think of as product-led sales versus sales-driven?
Product-led sales, you have a following user journey. You start with an acquisition, whether it's marketing-led or product-led, actually does not matter. But it starts with an acquisition and some sort of usage, self-serve usage. It can be freemium, it can be self-serve monetization. That also does not matter. But the point is that the product is able to generate some usage without any involvement of people in the equation. Then on top of that usage, you're starting to grow your ability to understand how closely they're starting to approach a point where the entire enterprise would benefit of being on the product. So the core sign that you look here is for some sort of network effects inside organization. That doesn't mean your product has to have network effects on the platform level, but there has to be some sort of network effects within the user base, within the team, inside the organization, inside the account that you are prospecting with. That creates a product qualification model. So you start scoring people based on their volume of usage, based on the velocity, based on the breadth of feature use. Maybe it's on some of the behavioral tactics. Maybe it's on some of the demographics that you know about them. Maybe it's certain use cases. But you start scoring them and understanding what is your probability of successfully selling to the entire organization based on this org usage? And that's when sales gets involved. Your first motion is always to create hand raisers. That's an organic way to generate pipeline. Let's push these levers to drive this usage and generate a sales lead form complete, which is a hand raiser event. And then sales will close it. Amazing. The second layer that you find people that act like hand raisers but are not hand raising, and then you go and you quote unquote outbound to them to try to find either an enterprise buyer or try to get through the user to get introduced to enterprise buyer. But that's fundamentally product-led sales, where you use the product as your sales enablement material. As opposed to in the traditional sales-led world, you would start with a marketing qualified lead or prospecting and outbounding to find a buyer. You would do lots of demos and lots of fining and dining them to try to convince them to purchase the product. And only after the purchase would some usage occur. And then you constantly battle utilization issues because you sell as much as possible to the entire organization. And then you have to catch up to that contract value in order to get the most value out of it, because you have to justify all of that fining and dining enterprise buyer with a really big initial cost to the organization.
Awesome. What an amazing definition. I'm going to clip this and make it its own little mini soundbite because I haven't heard such a clear and holistic definition. So thank you for that.
Of course.
This is also a good segue to chatting about freemium versus trials, which I know you have strong opinions about. And I know you're a big fan of freemium models over trials. And so I'm curious to hear your first general, I guess, thesis on freemium versus trials. And then I'll have a few questions around this.
Sure. So freemium is where you are allowed to use the product in some sort of free capacity, and you still have feature walls and you still have usage walls very frequently, but there's some sort of ongoing forever free. Trial is also you're allowed to use the product in some capacity, but there's a time component. It's time bound. Now, freemium and trial at the end of the day are the same thing. They allow for some free usage of the product. It's just trial creates the superficial time bound on top of that usage. What ends up happening with trial actually is that the amount of time that it takes for me to try something versus the amount of time it takes for you to try something might be very different time frames. If I'm in a small startup, amount of time for me to complete certain project may be 24, 48 hours. If you work for a very large enterprise with a ton of dependencies and lots of resourcing to mangle, it might take you a month just because of the scope of the work. So if the trial is 7 days, who is it going to actually trial for? It's going to trial for me in a small startup, and it's going to completely alienate you, large enterprise. So companies that go with trial models, especially if they go after B2B segment with trials that are time-based, they fundamentally alienate large enterprises of ever truly trying their products, unless they go and start renewing their trials constantly until they get to the point where they need 2-3 months finally to materialize and get the value in it. So my ask of you is, why create that superficial time component, which is not a good measure of how long it will take me to get the value out of the product, and now why push it into some other usage metric that is not time-based. Great example of this is MongoDB. I advised for them for a long time, and I allowed their freemium, which is really a trial in disguise, but it's not a time-based trial. It's a usage-based freemium. They allow for a free cluster to be developed completely for free, but it's a community cluster. It's a shared cluster. Nobody in their right mind would put a product application on the shared environment. That would be crazy. But if you want to play around with it, then absolutely go for it. And there's no time bound of how long it will take you to prototype something and understand whether MongoDB is the right solution for you. It's a great trial where any production use case will go into their paid monetization model, but it doesn't give you this weird concept of you only have 7 days to do it. Because we're busy, I'm busy, week flies by, and sometimes I don't have time to invest into discovery of a new product. So don't time bound me in this stressful environment where time is not a usage metric that most customers and most users will appreciate and abide by in the first place.
I'm thinking of products like Okta, maybe Zendesk, Looker, where they probably require a lot of handholding and support, and they're maybe not ready to be self-serve. Is your sense they should also be freemium, or is it fix your self-serve product and make that work?
In all of those products, and I'll add Amplitude, it's a high friction activation as well, connecting with your data source. MongoDB, standing up a database for your application is a huge friction. Twilio, Contentful, all of those are high friction products. The question is the high friction for which segment? If I'm a small business still, startup, I don't have high friction. I'm a team of 1 engineer and I'm a CEO. I can go do it tomorrow. Versus if you work for a large enterprise of 1,000+ people, sure, it's a high friction. I appreciate it. It will take a whole village in order to activate something like that. So I think that there is freemium case for everyone, especially if you are trying to land a customer that you might not even wanting to monetize at the beginning, by the way, because you need to have a very good strategy behind your freemium. We talked about trial, and trial is strictly for POC, so proof of concept, and lower my friction of activation. Freemium can give you a lot more goodness past that, but there's always use cases that actually can do it self-serve, and the only limitation is the cost that it takes for you to provision it via self-serve, because it's a complicated workflow, or for them to do it. And the whole innovation of our field constantly pushes that cost down. And that's why you have no-code platforms really ripping through our space and enabling users to do things that you had to have teams and departments and somebody very technical do it before. So I would push on that and say you have to continue innovate. Even Snowflake, they have their trial. Even Okta has their trial now. So they all have some sort of version of freemium that they're all going down with, and it's happening in every single sector. So if you're not doing it, again, somebody else is going to do it, because this is a Trojan horse into organization that is based on user focus.
Got it. So basically, the takeaway is always have something free and self-service. It doesn't need to be the entire product. It doesn't need to replace trial. Go ahead.
I would say you can't just say have something free. I will take it one step further. You have to know your strategy behind your freemium. Strategies is just a POC. MongoDB example that I gave, it's a POC. It's a fantastic POC that works very well for them. But it doesn't have to be just POC. It can be a use case that actually gives you a lot of indirect monetization that you never want to monetize in the first place. For example, for Miro, they give 3 editable boards for free. For some people, that's enough. And they'll never actually pay for Miro. And for Miro, that's okay, because they will share those boards with other people. They will collaborate with other people. They will acquire other users for them. We had the same thing at SurveyMonkey. We had half of our user base that was free, that was retained and healthy, and we were happy about it because they were doing 100% of our acquisition. So we didn't have to spend a lot of time and money on marketing and sales. So you can have a very strategic reason for having just a freemium use case that actually has retention on it, especially if you have indirect monetization. You might have it because you're wanting to land with a segment that you're not monetizing right now, but you want to expand with them. So it's a strategic land. You might have a freemium because you already have commoditization happening in your space. So the freemium offering is just commoditized. You have to give it away for free. The question is why would they then pick your free? So you have to include some sort of innovation in it as well to differentiate yourself from the market. Or your free can be a means of you creating your product in the first place. What I mean for that is freemium is a breeding ground for adjacent use cases and adjacent personas that you can discover and you can pivot your roadmap to. And you'll be the first one on the ground already seeing it as opposed to potentially missing the trend. Or you can be collecting data on freemium that actually allows you to build your products. LinkedIn is a perfect example. They have a strong freemium base, network effects, and then they build their sales navigator and other recruiting products on top of it. Without that freemium base, they would never be able to sell their paid products, but they're completely separate from their freemium strategy. So I would say the biggest mistake is to think of freemium as just conversion rate optimization for paid. That's a tactic that you do have to deploy on top of freemium. But the first question that you should ask is, what is the reason for having freemium and strategic business impact that freemium can drive for you?
You may have just answered this, but for a product leader or founder who's thinking about what they should make free in their freemium model, do you have kind of a mental model of how you think about here's what you should make free? Or is that too big of a question for a quick answer?
So, you first have to align on what your strategic value of free is. I do have a general framework of saying freemium has to check one of these boxes. Does it help my indirect monetization? So some sort of virality or network effects. If it does, I'm probably going to make it free. Does it suffice for every single user, regardless of their complexity? If it does, then it's probably commoditization of the feature anyways, and I should make it free. Does it help my aha moment? If it does, then I definitely want to have a POC as part of my free, and I'm going to put it in the free offering. Does it create habit loops for me? So let's say notifications or some sort of channel communication. If it does, then I'm probably going to put it for free. So anything that actually creates friction for my growth model, I'll probably gate it in the paid. Anything that promotes my growth model, I will put it into free. Now, it is very heavily dependent on your actual monetization strategy. So it's a little bit of over-encompassing statement, but at the end of the day, I'm thinking about it very much. How does free help me achieve my growth model outcomes without sacrificing monetization potential?
Awesome. I want to make sure we have a chance to chat about hiring for growth and hiring a growth leader, kind of helping companies find the next Elena. You wrote a guest post in my newsletter, which is one of the most shared posts across my newsletter. And so there's a couple things I wanted to touch on there. One is you share advice of when you're looking for your first growth hire is find someone internal versus trying to find like an Elena of today. I'd love to hear your just general advice around that. Just like, where do you find a growth leader and why is it often best to find them internally?
Are we looking for first growth hire or a growth leader?
Either one, but both would be great.
So I'm a firm believer that growth is an evolution, not a revolution. The more you can evolve your organization to have growth mindset and understand the value of growth, the better it is. That's why I'm a big proponent of finding somebody internally. It might be your FP&A analyst. It might be your existing product manager. It might be your data analyst. It might be your engineer that is very connected to a business and they're also technically inclined. They can go and execute on first couple of hypotheses for you. So does it have to be internal? Absolutely not. But you are risking quite a bit by bringing somebody externally, especially as your first hire, because they're not familiar with your product and how your growth model should function. And growth model should be very authentic and local to your product offering. And if somebody from the outside comes in and just slaps their previous company's growth model onto your product, it's most likely going to have 99% rejection rate and failure rate with your customers and within your employees, unless you give them actually time to figure out what your growth model is. And that might take 3 to 6 months, potentially even longer, depending on complexity of your product. So if you want quick wins, I think internal hires are the way to go. If you're willing to wait and educate and sponsor your growth hire, absolutely bring them in from the outside. But don't fall into the trap to say, I don't know, my growth is slowing. I'm just going to bring somebody from the outside and they're going to fix it. Because that is guaranteeing that you're going to part with that person in a year to 2 years time frame. And most likely, you're not going to see any step function change in your growth trajectory.
Why is that?
Because if they're under pressure to come in and accelerate your growth right away, they will copy paste. That's the only way to do it, because that's the only proven pattern that they've seen in the past. Now, if you're hiring from maybe your direct competitor, maybe you'll have a little bit better chances. But even when I, for example, was at SurveyMonkey, our main competitor was Qualtrics. We had very different growth models. So Qualtrics' growth model slapped on SurveyMonkey would not work because of how product functioned and how product was actually intertwined with the market. So I just think that copy paste never works. That's why I heavily involve and I heavily invest into creating frameworks for growth as opposed to success points and success patterns, because those have extremely high failure rate. And even today, I come in, I've been with Amplitude for 4 months, for example. I try some things and I think it's going to have step function change because I've seen it in the past and it doesn't. And I'm like, I have to pull back. I constantly have to pull back and say, don't just copy paste, because it's so intuitive to do, to try to replicate your previous successes.
When would you say is the right time for a startup to bring in a growth, kind of a full-time growth person?
So growth can only be discussed if you have a strong product market fit. What does it mean to have strong product market fit? Is that you, A, have retention, obviously. So it takes some time to actually measure retention. And I would say at least 6 months to almost a year post initial offering. That's when you truly know whether customers are retaining with you. And number 2, that you actually have some sort of ability to acquire and monetize your customers potentially from the beginning. So there's some sort of green shoots in your ability to drive distribution of your product. Growth will come in and they will help build it out and scale it and innovate on your growth model. But to hire a growth person to figure out your growth model from the beginning, I think that's a mistake and it's a delegation. It's like hiring a product person and saying, I don't know what I want to build, go build it for me, but I want to have a successful company. You'd never do that. You would create the first product market fit yourself as a founding team. So as a founding team, you have to create first growth model. Otherwise, it's delegating one of the most important portions of the business that if you're not involved in it and then you're not driving the first iteration of it yourself, I think you're setting yourself up for failure.
Maybe just a last question, and I'll let you go. And I'd love to do another one of these because I feel like I could ask you questions in infinite time. For folks just thinking about how to drive growth, how to approach growth, do you have any general tips and pieces of advice for how to think about growth for their company and their team?
My biggest piece of advice is that you need to understand how to find patterns in the problems that you're solving. The hardest thing in growth is context switching. How do I optimize this funnel? Or how do I improve conversion rate here? How do I stand up a loop here? If you have a framework of how to solve for it, it becomes a localization of the framework problem, which is a lot easier for us to scale, to do more of, and to do successfully and repeatably and sustainably versus approaching each problem on an individual basis. And this is advice for any leader. This is not just growth. In growth, there's just needs to be a growth model that a lot of us unfortunately don't think about. We just think about it as conversion rates and revenue, as opposed to understanding the framework behind it. That's why I push so hard on it from a growth perspective. But try to minimize your context switch. I think that's the key in order to create repeatable, sustainable, and competitively defensible growth model that is driving growth culture and growth mindset across the company, because it's something that people can grasp on.
Amazing. Elena, thank you so much for doing this. I learned a ton. I can't wait to get this episode out. 2 questions. Where can folks find you online? And then how can listeners be helpful to you?
So you can always find me on LinkedIn. That's my main platform where I post most of my insights and I share tidbits of information and frameworks that I discover that I find to be useful for others. So follow me there. And in terms of useful, if you have really interesting examples of product-led growth models in B2B, or if you're on the jam on how to evolve your B2B growth model, hit me up. I love those conversations.
Wow, I'm going to be doing that. Thank you so much for being here, Elena.
Okay, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for listening. If you found this valuable, you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Also, please consider giving us a rating or leaving a review, as that really helps other listeners find the podcast. You can find all past episodes or learn more about the show at lennyspodcast.com. See you in the next episode.